I'm live. I'm live. Just waiting for the time. It's almost time to get started. Just listen to my song right now. Getting started soon, guys. Thank you for being here, pacing high. You can see my hair's a mess tonight. So what do you think of the song? Can you hear it okay? I don't know what to do with my hair. I don't know. Left or right? What do you think? Working on some songs right now, just kind of getting ready to get started in these next few moments. Just kind of getting ready to talk about this. This is a lot to talk about and dig into tonight. Thank you for being here. Thanks for being on board. I just kind of want to play this song and kind of just prepare myself for a moment here, and I'll be right back, okay? Welcome aboard. We're getting started shortly. Just kind of warming up. All right, folks, I'm going to be on for just a few minutes tonight talking about answering questions about, sex and what that must be like for somebody in my position. It kind of starts off with a couple different things we're going to talk about tonight, kind of like what I was raised to think and believe about, sex, and then sort of what reality ended up being in my life, and then sort of how with all these years later, I'm going into my 14 and a half years, almost 15 years in since my diagnosis, and my last psychiatrist wrote down like treatment resistant. So it means that the voices and the treatment so far, the medications, haven't really worked enough to bring me the peace that I need. And for those who are here, don't know anything about schizophrenia, it's an illness where a person usually is, the hallmarks of it are hearing voices, but not everybody with schizophrenia hears voices. But auditory, visual hallucinations, delusional thinking, all paired with usually like disorganized speech or behavior, like maybe like what I'm experiencing now. Just talking about this is opening up a world of it's just a Pandora's box, because of course I'm going to talk about, my childhood, and that's most people with schizophrenia. In fact, I just was reading a recent study showing that people with schizophrenia, most of us, 90%, 80 to 90% of people with schizophrenia have a history of childhood trauma. And so, and I'm a statistic, but yeah, so kind of getting started. There'll be kind of three parts or segments to this live stream tonight. The first is sort of like what I was, like I said at the beginning, what I was raised to believe about sex, what I did know, what I didn't know, being raised sort of in a Pentecostal, evangelical, Christian, homeschooled home environment. And then again, kind of like what happened after. There's like the before the divorce, the BD period before my parents' divorce. And then there's this after everything that happened after my parents' divorce that continues sort of like into the present day, even at 35 years old. So, and then feel free to like drop questions in. I may not be able to look directly into the camera at times because of a visual hallucinations. As I said, I am an Army veteran who battles treatment-resistant schizophrenia, and I've been dealing with it since I was discharged from the military at the end of 2012. I went into the hospital because I had started to see a man, and across the street he'd been threatening me and my family, and started calling the police. And when they came over, he wasn't there. When my partner at the time came outside, he wasn't there. And then I started to like sort of get messages and from this dead French actress. It's a long story, and that will kind of back up. So we'll get into the first part, which is childhood and notions of sexuality or anything like that. I grew up in Southern California. I initially started off homeschooled. My father was a bus driver for Orange County Transit Authority in Orange County, California, and then we lived out near. Well, I think we start from the time I was born. I think we lived in Sun City. So if you know who Chuck Norris is, his mom actually went to church with my family out at this little. I think it was an evangelical free church, something like that, out in Sun City, California, which is way, way, way like away from LA. It's very far removed. This is a suburban, but like it's rural, almost rural community at this time. It wasn't very well developed. So yeah, so I was raised homeschooled. Forgive me if I stutter, if I speak fast or quickly. It's like I said, schizophrenia involves a lot of tactile and sensory stuff. And the more I am active on the camera and everything like that, the worse they get and the harder it is to cope with it. So I may just like take a minute to just collect my thoughts to keep going. But it was my early childhood was just, I don't really remember anything up until around age like five. I want to say 5 or maybe 3 or 5-ish, 5 definitely onward. Spotty memory of those years, and then 6-ish, and then 8 and 9 was like where everything sort of just collapsed. So I was raised. My father had wanted to be a minister, but during my early childhood years, my father drove for the bus, and it was a Teamster in Orange County, and so he wasn't home a lot. But we were homeschooled. My mom was my teacher, so we'll talk, and we're going to talk frankly about like sex right now. So trigger warning for like, sex. Even like we're going to get into sexual assault. We're going to get into like child sexual abuse and things like that. So, but we're going to talk about how that all impacts me as an adult within the scope of and the topic of like sexuality too. I didn't really know anything about sexual orientations or like anything about like LGBTQIA plus. That was not any part of I was born in 1990. So by the time I was old enough to start really exploring my own body, I was maybe like 5. I was really young. I remember when I first started sort of those bodily explorations and like masturbation and things like that. And I remember one real core memory is of being like told like, quit rubbing yourself. Like, and I heard that from my mom, who I have to say, like, my mom was actually really warm and loving and huggy person at that time. I remember very fondly my early childhood being very closely held by my mom, and the fruits of the spirit. We were my parents believe in speaking in tongues. They're Pentecostal. My father attended the Assemblies of God, Berean Christian school, ministry school, whatever, but he didn't finish there. My parents didn't agree on like all of the different doctrines and messages that they would hear at different churches. So we ended up going to like from church to church. We went like church hopping, I call it. Like my parents would argue about just different interpretations. My father is a staunch literal interpreter of the Bible. He is a minister and pastor now in retirement in a little church up in the mountains in Southern California. And so my parents were just very devout from my perspective during these years. So it was scary, like, to hear my mom be like, no, don't do that, you know? And so I didn't. And I almost remember like never even like really going forward to explore any further than beyond that experience. And my memory is spotty. But so yeah, it was just wasn't something that I didn't know anything about homosexuality or any of that. But I did have a hero in my life, and it was Captain Janeway. And it was Star Trek. My father raised me like every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. We watched Star Trek Voyager, and if we missed it, Sunday nights were the reruns. And so I just remember very vivid memories of my my breath catching whenever like Captain Janeway was on screen, and especially when she smiled, or especially when she showed any kind of vulnerability or anything like that. My heart would just stop, and I would just like become breathless. And I felt that way very early on and for a very long time. And I don't know if my mom caught me, kind of saw that, but just the fact that I was constantly running around trying to do my hair up all the time, like I was always trying to match the whole Janeway look, like this, like this, but like the big leg of this, the Janeway look, the big, hair and everything. And I wanted to be Janeway. I liked Janeway. I felt around the time that my parents' divorce happened, it was just like this huge implosion/explosion. There was peace and idealistic, like sort of a utopian life, like Star Trekian ideal, nuclear family existence that sort of seemed to blow apart when my parents' divorce happened. And it was an ugly divorce. It wasn't an amicable split. It was fraught with rage, and there were scenes that I can't even begin to describe that I don't want to relive now because they don't really pertain to sex. And this live stream tonight is really about sex. But if you want to know about all the other stuff, like all that crazy, real like trauma shit that happened, you should watch the other live streams about like that kind of part of my childhood. But this is really about sex and how I was impacted. So my mom began to sort of pull away from me as I got older. And I was only like 5, 6, 7, and 8. My parents split when I was 8. They were in court for custody of my sister and I on my 9th birthday. And I had to kind of like figure out what to do because public school was scary. I had been homeschooled. I didn't know what sarcasm was. I didn't know what teasing was. The first thing that happened on my first day of public school, a boy stood up and did this like suck it thing. You guys remember the world WWF? It was WWF in the 90s. And then the World Wildlife Foundation was like, fuck you guys, you got to change it. So they changed it to what it is now. But back then it was World Wrestling Federation, and it was like a big deal. And kids were obsessed with it. I had no idea about this. I didn't know about Ninja Turtles. I didn't know about nothing. I knew about the fruits of the Spirit. I could recite the Bible. I just didn't have any concept of sarcasm because I was just raised to like speak from the heart, wait for like the spirit of the Lord to fill you and just have that be what guides you, and just pray, and like pray before you speak kind of behavior. And I just didn't know anything about this stuff. So when this boy stood up and he was like, suck it, you fag, or faggot, or whatever. And then the teacher made him stand up and like get the dictionary out and read the word faggot and the definition of that, what that was: a bundle of sticks tied together with string, or English slang, British slang for a cigarette, or a derogatory. They didn't get to the part where it said anything about homosexuality. I don't know if that was in the dictionary at the time or not. But so anyway, I didn't know anything about any of that. All I knew is that for some reason, my mom didn't like me liking Janeway, and I didn't like me spending so much time obsessing over like every little aspect of Janeway. And her whole character, her backstory was that she was sort of like this lonely leader, and she couldn't like have a relationship, and they were on the other side of the galaxy looking for home. And she was leading the way back home. And I saw my mom as sort of like the leader of the ship because I was homeschooled. I thought of her that way. But I didn't understand why, because we were so close. We were so close. As time went on, later on, fast forward to like high school, I got this answer from my dad. My dad finally explained it to me, like, because my sister outed me to my dad. And I confided my sister in 8th grade, between 8th and 9th grade, that I was bisexual and leaning toward identifying as like lesbian. And I asked my sister to, keep that secret for me. And it was just like the one thing I ever asked, but she couldn't do it. she got mad at me, and like she was joking around, and she got kind of like spiteful, and she said, well, yeah, well, you're going to, my sister, by the way, is a militant atheist, doesn't believe anything, but knew that I was a spiritual person, and I really did, was a Christian, very much a devout, identified very much as a Christian as a child, and wanted to be a daughter of God and a child of God and a good follower of Jesus, good Christ follower. And I just wanted to be perfect. I just wanted to be perfect and loved. And I wanted to be loved and held. And my mom just started to kind of pull away. My parents' divorce meant that we ended up kind of going from place to place. I never had a stable home life after that. She ended up in a relationship with somebody who ended up being convicted for child molestation. After the statute ran out on the crimes that he committed against my family, he continued to further victimize other children. And I sort of hold my mom responsible for this because, like, I'm one of those victims. My sister's a victim. My whole family were victimized by this person, essentially, in one way or another, including on that level. And so that definitely kind of messed up things for me in terms of the way I see the world, because it's like, yeah, I want to trust people. I want to believe that when a person says that this will never happen again, that when a person recognizes that what happened was not right, not safe, and that you should expose your children to that. It was just that those things, like all the things that I was raised to believe in about family and the importance of that bond, that marriage, and that it really broke in me something. But I do believe in marriage still. I identify as a lesbian, and I don't blame anybody for that. It's my mom kind of like called it because, yeah, I was crushing. I was hardcore crushing. I mean, I was really, my heart was stopping. My heart stops for my fiance now, like in the same way that it did when I was that age. So yeah, my dad had told me, like, your mom said that your obsession with Jamie was unnatural and that she wanted to take you to see a shrink. And I guess that explains everything about my childhood now looking back. And so I realized that when I came out, when I was like, I was sort of outed. I had kept a journal with my first girlfriend. I had my first real relationship with anybody. Like my first like boyfriend was 8th grade. And we were living in Monterey, Seaside area. If you know where that is, there's an old military installation that they sold a part of it to the university, and then there's a school district that has, for all the military personnel and the university folks to send their kids to school. And it sits right overlooking the ocean. And so in the times of turbulence, when my mom and my stepdad were on the outs, we were either in battered women's shelters, or we were in motels, or we ended up finding a place to go. And at this particular time, I had a restraining order. We had a restraining order out against Al. And like I said, he's convicted. He's on the registry. Like, if you looked him up, it wouldn't be slander or libel because he's in the public record as a convicted a child molester. But so I'm not maligning anybody or like libeling or slandering anybody when I say his name publicly. And he's already confessed to all of the things that he's done. Like I said, he's multiple crimes. But anyway, at this time we were on the run. He threatened my mom's life before, and that she'd taken him back, and then she found out she was pregnant. So we ended up in Gilroy, and then we moved from Gilroy to Seaside. And it was there where I had my first like kind of boyfriend, girlfriend, whatevers, and I was in 8th grade, and I met 2 girls named Ariel and Bailey, and they were goth and into like Anne Rice and all this vampire stuff and the occult. And that, of course, did not sit well with my mom. And let me also again remind you that my mom was such a strict, at this time in my life, I didn't know my mom to be anything less than a devout Christian who was just trying to follow the Bible as strictly as possible. So like, I remember we were not allowed to play with guns, anything shaped like a gun at all. No water guns, nothing, no laser guns, nothing like that. You couldn't or laser tag, nothing that was shaped like a gun could I ever have in my possession. I remember her running up the street and giving the ice cream guy what for, because he was selling us gum that was in wrappers that looked like cigarettes. And so, yeah, my mom, no Cinderella, I was not allowed to watch movies like Hunchback of Notre Dame, no Pocahontas, very little Disney at all, because most Disney had magic or some kind of adaptation of a historical novel or something that my mom was just like, no, they ruined it. And they did. They really did a number with Pocahontas in particular. That one's the worst and most egregious, and I agree with her on that point. But, and Hunchback, that one is dark now that I've actually finally seen it around like 30 or 31 or so. I finally got a chance to actually watch The Hunchback of Notre Dame all the way through. I was like, yeah, I don't know if they should have even made that one, honestly. That was a little bit too dark for the kiddos. I don't know who they made that for, really. But anyway, so back to sex. So yeah, so I had my first, these two girls were in a relationship together. And so it was the first encounter I ever had in my peer group or in my world of two girls being like intimately involved with one another. And their privacy is important to me, but they were really important part of my life. My mom always asked me questions about Bailey in particular because she lived up the street. We tended to spend a little bit more time together. Nothing ever happened between us. I did have a dream about them both that kind of spoiled our 8th grade promotion field trip. I'm so sorry to this day that I did that. I told them about that dream and I should not have, but they were my best friends and I didn't know what to make of my feelings. And I was just trying to understand what that meant for me. And because I'd held it down, I'm straight, I'm the straight one. They're the lesbians, I'm the straight one of the group. So I may be goth, but that doesn't mean that I'm lesbian or gay or anything like that. And I tried to just really push it away. So I dated David, and David was our friend Jake's friend. And he wasn't in our real circle, but he was Jake's friend. And so he became kind of part of our circle. And he was a tall guy, broad shoulders, blonde hair, blue eyes, kind of a tall guy. Like I said, really broad shoulders. He could have been like a linebacker, but he was 8th grade. And so we started dating, and he was like the first boyfriend I ever had. My first Valentine. Gave me a little Valentine plushie, white plushie with red little hearts for its little paws. And everything seemed to be okay. I don't remember actually kissing him or him being my first kiss because I don't think it got that far. We were on the bus going to school one day, and he decided, now I have a Jewish ancestry, and we'll get to all the politics of all that later. But right now, we'll table that. But this is about sex, so let's get to. So he drew a swastika on his arm in big giant black Sharpie, and I had just come into this knowledge that I had a Jewish heritage and stuff, and so I was really adamant that he should please take that off, and because being blonde hair and blue eyed and everything, and he slicked his hair in gel, and it was the year 2003, 2004. So we're, I don't know, the slick gel hair thing. I don't know. He was going for the goth greaser look. I don't know, something like that. But I didn't like it. And I asked him, please, out of respect for my family and my heritage and everything, I'm just asking for you to please take it off. And he just refused. So I broke up with him on the spot. And I just didn't realize we were in front of a lot of people because it was on the bus in front of our entire morning bus crew. So I know I embarrassed him, and then that was that. And then Jake and his best friend, ended up comforting me and saying, hey, look, he told me that he only went out with you because you have big tits. And so I don't know if you can tell, but of course, women can't help that our genitals are on our chest and visible for the world to see. Men, your genitals are more or less tucked away and invisible to most of the world. Some men are very largely endowed with their penises and all that, and they could be a little bit more bulgy and have a larger package, and then that can be more visible. But by and large, women by nature have more protruding breasts, and by the time I was 11, I had a fully developed chest pretty much. So I was wearing bras. I had to go bra shopping. I think when I was 10, I started shaving. My mom was like, if you're going to shave, you have to just know that you're going to be shaving forever. Once you start, you can't stop. It's like a can of Pringles. You'll never be able to stop again. And so I was shaving and everything like that at 10, 11 years old. I don't know what happened. Just after my parents divorced, my mom was like, Harry Potter Christmases. And suddenly it was magic everywhere. And I don't know. It was there were no rules. And we were suddenly just, our life was completely topsy-turvy. Everything about being homeless and being evicted all the time, and Al coming in and out of our lives and just being whatever he was. When I was in 8th grade at this time, and Jake and I were going out, I was walking around with a restraining order against my stepdad. My mom married him, knowing that he had these predilections. She married him, but she got the church involved, and they went to this program called Celebrate Recovery, and the band's gonna make it kind of thing, where it's well, he admitted it, and he has said he was sorry, and he's sorry he's a pedophile. It's just the drugs, and if he just stayed clean and strummed his guitar and went to church, all would be well with the world. But when you put a pedophile close to children in a church, guess what happens? They tend to victimize children. So that's what happened, and that's what continued to happen. And my mom would just be like, nah, I can keep a better eye on him when we're together. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not true, but all right, keep telling yourself that. So I went about my business in 8th grade, just trying to be like away from my family as much as possible. And so Jake and I went out, and Jake was the boy that I kissed for the first kiss I had. And I just didn't feel anything. I didn't have any like spark or anything. It was like, I didn't have a brother growing up, but if I kind of always just saw men like brothers, and I don't know, I just didn't have any spark. So I thought, oh, maybe we're just not compatible. We're just better off as friends. So I stuck with that idea and told myself that was the truth. And of course, knowing that what I did now about my mom chasing me down with questions about Bailey all the time and asking me weird questions, the next year, well, Jake and Ariel cheated on Bailey and I. It's 8th grade, you guys. Jake and Ariel hooked up behind Bailey and I in our backs. And so it was really upsetting, of course. There was a deep sense of betrayal. I think I've stuck with me to this day about trusting people. And yes, intimacy and sex and all of that definitely felt like, why would I ever like trust somebody again? But I feel like, yeah, it's okay, because I didn't really feel like that connected to him anyway. So I was like, all right, you know what, you guys, you have fun together. I'm out of here. And then we moved. I moved to Monterey, and we didn't stay friends because they all went to different schools, and so I had to make new friends. Jake went to Seaside with me, but the others, they went to a charter school called Cypress, which is like a smaller school for like, again, it was like the artsy type of school for like the outcasts and rejects. And I was just like, I need to be like an ROTC because I need to go to college and there's no money. And I had to have a plan for I had a plan for my life from the time I was 10. So I went to Seaside High School and for my freshman year. And I had a boyfriend there, but it didn't last very long. He went away on a camping trip and told me like, nah. And I was like, yeah. And then I liked this girl named Bernadette. I had known her in 8th grade, and she had beautiful long brown hair, and I really liked her. I just thought she was just beautiful, and it just never got up the chance to ask her out. But I ended up going out with a girl named Ashley, and this is kind of like where people start talking about things like thruples and threesomes, and menage a trois in French culture is really like a true like polyamorous relationship with like 3 people in it. And so I guess that I met her in French class, and of course she's a sophomore, I was a freshman, and she was like the first girl I ever made out with, and my first like girl kiss with a girl, and I felt very at home. I felt like natural and organic. It felt very sensuous and normal and natural for me to kiss her. And I remember Jake pounding on the door trying to get me to like save me, rescue me from this girl. She said she had a brain tumor. I think she actually did have a brain tumor, but she also had a boyfriend. And she said, "Oh no, don't worry, he's okay with it." And I was like, "Are you sure?" I'm not sure. I'm okay with that. And so yeah, we broke up. But I ended up actually staying with my dad, and because my stepdad ended up back in the picture. And again, this pedophile in our lives once again, and I just had enough, and I was like, I'm not coming back. No matter, I don't care what the pastor says. I don't care what you say. I'm not like, I don't want to be anywhere. I can't do it anymore. I can't like be my mom's like keeper anymore. And she wasn't protecting me. She didn't protect us. She didn't protect my sister. And so how could I stay? So I resolved to not get on the flight, not go back home. So I never had a chance to ask Bernadette out. I never got a chance to really see anything through with Ashley. I actually broke that off because of the whole, she had a boyfriend and that wasn't cool with me, because I really am a monogamous person. As it turns out, I really was a monogamous person. I really wanted to be committed to one person. But yes, I was in the freshman year of high school. So, it was what it was. But I dated and had dates and went on dates, but it was through the internet, because at this time, like, I didn't date anybody. I went on a few dates and went out with a girl from my high school. When I stayed in Southern California in Corona, I went to Centennial, and I dated a girl who didn't have the best reputation. But she was a friend and a girlfriend of another friend of mine who was like the goth equivalent of my friends from Central Coast. And so I was trying to find those same kind of friends, and I did. This jock school of 3,000 students, these goth girls came across the quad, and I was like, I had a crush on her, and I asked her out through a letter, and then she told me she was in a relationship with like 2 other girls and a guy and stuff. And I was like, why does this keep happening to me? But it's like, I'm not judgmental. I don't judge people for polyamory at all. It's like, hey, as long as these things are consensual and you guys have mature communication and you are all on your own thing, that's all your business. You do what you need to do. That's not my orientation or my like predilection at all. I am very much a monogamous person. I mate for life kind of thing. And I don't know. I just don't want to be a part of that, but I understand people have really do have many dear friends in the LGBTQI community. You cannot be accepting and like a truly accepting person if you're not willing to accept everybody who may not live the same way that you do, but you understand that they're the way they are. And I wouldn't want people to judge me for being lesbian. And so I don't judge people for being anything, polyamorous or whatnot. But I do judge people for being pedophiles and molesters, and I don't like us being all conflated with them, because the child molester who victimized my family and many other families and went to prison for it was a heterosexual man. So, and he targeted little girls. And so, I don't know what to say about that, except that pedophiles come in all kinds of flavors and orientations and genders and all of that. So it doesn't matter. Like, it's not something that is just a gay thing. And it shouldn't be misconstrued in that way. And people shouldn't be conflated with these kinds of people who are deeply, deeply ill. And this man is sociopathically ill. Like, he just doesn't have empathy. He continues to do it and he manipulates. And so for me, it's like, I don't think that my stepdad made me gay. I was already gay. I was already like attracted and have these attractions. And I accept that about myself. And I always did. And I accept that. So I explored a lot of like the classic lesbian literature and like Virginia Woolf and a lot Sappho, and I explored a lot of stuff in 8th grade. I found like the Marquis de Sade, and that was crazy, wild stuff. I shouldn't have been reading that at 13, 14 years old, but I did. And I exposed myself. There was a teacher gave us a book on the occult, and my mom went to the school and tried to have him fired about it. It was like, this is devils, this is the devil, this is the devil, and stuff like that. You're trying to corrupt my child, and didn't want me to go to my 8th grade promotion dance because of it. And she wanted this teacher fired. And it was like, yeah, I was sitting there flipping through, like, I was reading Justine. I read, sodomy, 101 days of sodomy in the bedroom or whatever, philosophy in the bedroom, 101 days of sodomy. And anyway, it was just like all the Marquis de Sade's literature. I read Anne Rice and all of that. And yes, I was like definitely like turned on by some of it, but not like in a sadomasochistic way. For sure, none of that is turning me on at all. But it was just the idea that there were depictions of women and having these sexual relationships with each other, and very bold and very graphic. And yeah, it was very, very sensuous. So for me, that definitely, I find that appealing. It turned me on. So I embraced that. And then I started telling my sister, and then she said that, hey, you're going to hell because you're gay, in front of my dad. And then I left the room. I went into my room. My dad came in the room. He sat down on the bed next to me. This is my Pentecostal conservative father, born in 1954. And, my father turns to me and he says, look, I was raised to believe that it's a choice and a sin. But you're my daughter and I love you. And you're kind of I think you're too young to really know for sure. And to be honest, I would knock until you've tried it. And my jaw hit the floor. And I was just like, what in the holy fuck are you? What? Father? Pastor? What did you just say? Are you encouraging me to do? So you're telling me I have two choices. One of my first choice is premarital sex, which is a sin next to murder in like the most right-wing conservative, traditional sense of the word. Yeah, I was just like, are you kidding me right now? We're not really seriously encouraging me to have premarital sex with a man, are you? And then he was like, well, I realize now maybe I shouldn't have quite said that. And I was like, yeah, maybe not. And then I was like, well, what's my other option then? To live a lie? To be dishonest, both to the man and to myself? For the sake of a text that was written by men, and has been interpreted and reinterpreted and translated and interpreted and is fallible because it was written by men 3,500 years ago? Is that fair to expect that of me? And he just didn't really answer. And then he said, look, you're my daughter and I will love you always. I will always love you. And that's where it's been ever since, I don't think he'd officiate my wedding, but I think he'd be there. I think he would come to the reception. I think he would want to I think he did say at one point that he would be there, but I don't know where he stands on it now. We've had many different, I don't know, we're not quite in that place anymore. That was, 20 years ago, and this is 2025, and things have sort of deteriorated. We've had a lot of arguments about trans identities and all of that. And none of that has to do with this live stream, really. So I'll just get back to like the sex. So yeah, I went out with one girl at my high school and then decided that was a bad idea because, this girl had a reputation. I didn't want to get caught up in anything. And I was already getting talked about. And people already had rumors about me, being gay and everything like that at this very preppy, jockey, it's a CIF championship school, very IB school, very just, just not like not for, I didn't think there was no like GSA until, I think there was a GSA that was around, but I didn't know about it. So I was, doing my best to kind of keep my stuff under wraps and like not really do anything. I knew I was going to join the army. So I was already kind of working on trying to join the army, and Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place at the time. So I just focused on school and theater and all of that. And then I ended up finding some dating sites online or social networking for like LGBTQIA people, and met this girl, and her name was Jessica, and she was Brazilian. She's born here, but her mom was Brazilian, so she spoke Brazilian Portuguese, and she had short hair, was sort of a pixie cut, and she those skinny jeans and the guitar, very stereotypical, kind of like pixie Justin Bieber, kind of like think just like Brazilian. Brazilian Justin Bieber, more or less. And that was her. But I was just head over heels. She was so talented guitarist and singer. And I was 17, and I fell in love with her. And, yep, we had a lot of crazy, wild, like shenanigans. We probably, I have a lot of memories of, we went to a cemetery that had a beautiful park, and like there was like an abandoned old, it kind of reminds me of Hocus Pocus, like the Sanderson sisters like house, and how they turned it into museums. And there's like this sort of a museum that sits like back into this wooded area behind this old cemetery in Redlands and Loma Linda in Southern California. And we would pull up my car up the curb and like, make out. And, and I remember having probably lost my virginity. We were watching, oh God, I'm so embarrassed to admit that we were watching Notes on a Scandal. We watched Notes on a Scandal, which I now condemn. I condemn vehemently this movie because of the portrayal of the predatory lesbian and everything like that. But I will say this. It was the music. I love Philip Glass. I love The Hours because of the music. Not as much because of the story or the acting, but just because of that music. And, we just like were very romantically, like we were alone in her dad's apartment, and one thing led to another, and, that was it. I lost my virginity. And the next day it was like, hey, are you on your period? And I was like, nope. I think that was it. It was that. And that was that. So I just kind of like, we were kind of wild and crazy everywhere where we could. So we would pull up my car, my Ford Escort, up next to the little grassy knoll area next to the cemetery, and like just kind of go to town on each other on the back seat of the red upholstery. I had a white Ford Escort, 1991 Ford Escort, 1990 Ford Escort. So about as old as I was. And I got my license as soon as I could. It was complete independence and freedom. So yeah, of course, I exploited those moments of freedom and independence to, yes, have unadulterated like sex on the backseat of my car. But you know what? I don't regret it, because even though she broke my heart and told me she couldn't be in a relationship and wanted to find herself, and then ended up somehow mysteriously, magically dating my ex-girlfriend. How does that happen? I don't know how that works, because I didn't know anything about any of this. I know that there was like a whole stereotype about that, or all the lesbian. How? Because we met each other on a dating site. How did they meet each other? One of them was in Woodland Hills. We broke up because of the distance. That's why. I couldn't drive all the way out to LA. She couldn't always come out. Her mom basically had to drive her. And so we broke up because of that. But if we had been closer, I probably would have maintained the relationship. So it was just weird, because when she broke up with me, she's like, I can't. Jessica broke up with me. She said, I can't be with you because I can't be with anybody. I'm just, I'm 17, 18. I'm just trying to find myself, and I don't want to be in a relationship with anybody right now. So I was like, that's my relationship. Like my first relationship, I lost my virginity to. I was in love, and then catch me angsty as fuck, listening to like a Fine Frenzy, and just Missy Higgins and the story, the soundtrack of my life, and was just, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that this person who had just been, I thought things had been going so well, and then to find out that when she came to pick up her sweater and she came to pick up her ring and a few other things, she had like a cardigan, a navy blue cardigan that she wanted to cut by and get, and she came with Gabby, my ex, and I didn't know they were together. I was like, what? And they got married. They actually got married. And yeah, Gabby wouldn't come talk to me at all. They acted like jerks. They just like, they acted like I did something wrong, but I didn't know what had I done. I was honest with Gabby. I told her that our distance between us just wasn't going to work. And that somebody else had done that to me before, because I'd gone out with them. I had a lot of like these different like relationships like online, that like I went on these dates and I met with them, and one of them was Amber, and Amber is the one that I think about now with the schizophrenia and a lot of the tactile stuff. Probably did the most number on me in terms of like psychosis symptoms, because I remember, being like, I was like 15 or 16, and I went out to on a bus out to Hemet, and it dropped me off at the mall. And the plan was I was going to meet up with the girl I was going to have a date with, and if all went well, we were going to kind of go steady. And I was out there. I got off the bus at the mall, and as soon as I got off the bus, there was this girl waiting for me with like a whole posse, like 10 or 11, maybe even 12 of her friends, yelling at me and like threatening me and telling me so you think you can just come up in here and take my girl and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what is going on? She's like, I'm Alyssa and I'm Amber's girlfriend and blah, 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 and fuck you, you whore, and blah, blah. And they just like start to like jump, like they want to jump me, and they're like coming at me. And then Amber, and of course I recognized her because of her picture on MySpace. Shout out to MySpace. Those were the days. So she comes rushing across the parking lot to my rescue, like my knight in shining armor, and tells them all like what the fuck is going on here? Back the fuck off. And you can tell she's been in a few brawls, because she's not like afraid to fight people. And she's got fists up, and we're like, I'm ready to like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. And all of a sudden, yeah, she tells me, yeah, this is my ex, and oh my God, let's get out of here. And so we walk back to her mom's apartment where she's living, and she's 1 or 2 years older than me, I want to say. And so yeah, I slept in her bunk bed with her. Nothing happened. As God is my witness, nothing happened. But her little brother was in the room with us, and he didn't like me. I think he liked Alyssa, or I think he saw or heard Alyssa and all that happened. I don't know if she said something to him, but it seemed like it was like an ambush. I don't know. I just feel like I was accused of something I didn't do. And he said that I like messed with his sister. I'm like, I didn't mess with anybody. I slept in the same bed, but nothing happened. We just slept. And nothing happened. So they say, look, you got to go. You got to go. So my best friend I lived in Gilroy, and I met Lindsay. And then Lindsay was from Gilroy. Okay. So I moved from Southern California to Gilroy, and then Lindsay ended up moving from Gilroy to Hemet. So we swapped places. And that was my high school years. I didn't go to school with my best friend, but she lived out there, and her mom's house was somewhere in by the Walmart out there, somewhere on the other side of the city. And Amber's mom lived by the mall. So it was just a wild time to me, because they ended up like following me. This whole posse of people followed me, punching, shoving, kicking, screaming at me, calling me all kinds of stuff. I hadn't done anything wrong, but yet they were treating me as if I was some horrible monster who like assaulted somebody, or like I had done something that was really wrong, awful. And so I got so disoriented. It took me hours to find Lindsay's mom's house. By the time I got there, they were so angry. I was knocking on random doors because it was taking so long to find it. I got turned around in the housing tract. It was just right by that Walmart in Hemet. If you guys know what Domenigoni Parkway is, it kind of dumps you off. There's a Center, Stet Center, something like that out there, and by the high school. And so kind of like in between, kitty corner between the high school and the Walmart is this housing tract. And I just got so turned around. They were getting so mad. So I started knocking on random doors, and I said, you guys know where like the Haneys are, or the Haneys, Kathy and Lindsay and like Colby and them. And finally somebody said, yeah, we think maybe you're close, like around the block there. And eventually we found it. And Lindsay opened the door, and thank God, but I didn't say anything for a long time. So I think that contributed to some of the tactile stuff that I feel. So that we're talking about like childhood and adolescence and these first sexual experiences and all that dating stuff that you do when you're a teenager that you know you shouldn't be doing, but you're up to it anyway. Yeah, there were lots of consequences I experienced for all of that, and it definitely stays with me now because I think that's where a lot of the tactile stuff comes into play. And so anyway, yeah, so we just I moved on with the army stuff. I joined the army. Both my parents had to sign. Jessica broke my heart, and that was that. And then I ended up going off with another girl named Leslie. And then before I left for basic training, I broke up with Leslie because just we made out and stuff, but like her parents didn't want us to be together. They didn't want her to be with a girl. And I knew she wasn't going to be handling me being away even for basic training because I wasn't going to be coming back. I was joining the reserve, but it got so bad at one point where I was like, there's no way I can keep going to college. I need to be in the active duty army. So I joined the regular army component, and they swapped me over to a 5-year regular active duty contract. So I told her, like, I know I'm not really coming back here for a few years probably. So I just want to do you, like, I want to do right by you. And so we broke up. And she wasn't happy, but it's fine. She ended up with a guy, married to a guy. She was like into the rave scene and all that. And, you know, she lived happily ever after. So I went into the army, and as you can imagine, hiding your sexuality under Don't Ask, Don't Tell when you're like a big mouth like me, who was a theater person, who was an open book. And I really didn't believe that anybody was actually going to try and kick me out because I was gay at this time. I joined in 2007. I served over and through the course of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And by the time I got out, it was finally repealed. But like I was already out of the service, and with schizophrenia, by the time all that really happened, so I wasn't going back in the military. But there was a time when I fell in love with a fellow Star Trek fan who was from Australia, and I found out that I couldn't really be with her because it turned out she wasn't really gay. So again, I was somebody's experiment, and I went through a lot of these situations where I was kind of treated as somebody's like experiment or somebody's like good time gal. And I finally began to start to really realize like what that looked like, and started to reject people like that finally in my life. But I was in the military, and I fell in love with this Australian person, and I moved to Australia to be with her. And when I got there, basically she was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Well, you said that we couldn't be together. You said you loved me." She'd written me. She actually wrote me in basic training, "I love you. The thing you've been waiting to hear all along. Like, yes, I love you, and I can't wait to see you again," and everything. And I just couldn't understand like what went wrong there. But I dodged a bullet because when it comes to sex, you never know what happens. A person can like look really good on the outside, but they might have something going on the inside that ain't worth catching. So I turned out to be, I won't name her because of privacy and all of that. But, it's just, she ended up confiding in me that she had contracted an STD that is incurable. And so I'm very glad that like we never actually like had sex because I didn't contract anything. I never got that far. We like kissed on the lips. I was freaked out. And then she told me like, that's not how you get it and everything. And I was like, okay, good. Well, at least I know that, because it would be a crime to spread a disease knowingly. It's a crime. So I'm glad that I escaped from that. However, I did not escape from being sexually assaulted on the dance floor while I was dancing and minding my own business by a random man who just came out of nowhere and grabbed me really hard while I was dancing and inebriated, and then took off running, and then came back to try to do it again. And when he came back, I like gave myself an excuse to go back to the bar, and then I told them what was going on, and he saw me talking to the bartender too long. And he got freaked out and he left. And I never got a chance to I was underage drinking, and I was in the military at the time, and I thought I could handle myself. And then that happened. So that fucked with my head. And then there's this other guy that was in my unit who was like always pressuring me when I was drunk and stuff. And I always turned him down, but I couldn't explain why. And I didn't want to talk about being gay because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So when it talks about sex and talks about sexuality, it has a lot to do with like all of that stuff. And now it all compounds. And then there was another assault that happened. So that really created a lot of hypervigilance, and the traumatized brain of hypervigilance, and the lack of being able to trust people and believe that a person is genuinely sincere when they say that they're attracted to me. Because as it turns out, apparently like years later in 2017, the weekend after the shooting that happened in Las Vegas, I went to see Billy Idol. They wanted to, I have a sister who lives in Vegas. I have friends who live in Vegas. I go to Vegas every year. It's like my home away from home. And I wasn't gonna let this asshole who shot up the Route 91 festival fuck up our week, fuck up the city. Like, no, we're not gonna let fear stop us from going to these concerts and festivals. This is America, and everybody should be free to party and listen to whatever music, whether it's whatever, and no one has the right to take lives. So I told my girlfriend at the time, hey, I want to go to Vegas. Do you want to come with me? And she's like, no, if you go to Vegas, that's the end of our relationship. I'm breaking up with you. That's so disrespectful. And I was like, okay, I understand how you see it that way. I understand how you see it because you had friends who weren't at the festival that night, but they were in the vicinity and like in nearby hotels and stuff like that went into lockdown. So I understand what you're saying. But please respect me when I say that when I go to Vegas, first of all, I'm not going to hook up with anybody. I'm just going to see this Billy Idol concert and come back home. And I wanted to meet my sister. My sister is a bartender. I have a half sister from years and eons ago I never met, and I wanted to meet her, and I did. But I also went with David. So David, I told you at the very beginning of this live stream, this is where it all comes full circle. David Graham was my first boyfriend, and he ended up in the Marines. And my friend Jake, who I told you about in 8th grade, I went out with, and was my first boyfriend and kiss. And then he ended up cheating on me, and we broke up. And then I came out as gay. So, but Jake ended up being kind of a good friend, and he was in the Army, and David ended up in the Marine Corps. And so Jake was still friends with David, and David was posting stuff on Facebook about, it was just very mature, especially considering where we'd left things, his whole Nazi swastika thing and breaking up with him and kind of humiliating him. And so, but I saw like he had been in the Marine Corps, he was out of the Marine Corps, he had a child, he seemed to be very mature in his thinking. He said a lot of things that I was agreeing with about how we should treat each other as human beings in this world and everything. So I was like, oh, let me invite David along. And I, with that tickets I was able to get, and as a veteran, I can get like comp rooms. So I had a comp room, 2 queen beds. I said, hey, do you want to take the other bed? We'll go see Billy Idol. We'll have dinner. I'll go see my sister. I'll fly back the next day. And he's like, yeah, sure. That'd be great. It'd be nice to see you again. So after all these years, you would think a man has grown and he's learned so much, and he was a Marine. So that at this point now we have been drilled with the same value system. We've been indoctrinated with integrity and looking out for each other and honest, like integrity and doing the right thing and morals and ethics. And we've all been trained. Even though I was in the Army, he's in the Marine Corps, we all get the same training, essentially. We just don't leave each other behind. And we don't do what he did to me. So we got drunk, of course. We were drinking, and he starts telling me about, this is like the last thing I kind of remember, is that he starts telling me about how he has a sleepwalking disorder and that he lost custody of his son because he like spousal raped his wife while she was sleeping, while he was sleepwalking. And I was so drunk, I don't barely remember. I wasn't even sure if this conversation was real. Because I was pretty drunk, but I also know I have schizophrenia, so I was like, I don't even know if it's real right now. But then we went to Margaritaville and we played beer pong, and I remember losing and drinking very heavily. So by the time we had this conversation, that's like the last thing I remember. And then I ended up coming to like on my face in the hotel, in my bed, in the hotel room, which was at the Excalibur. And we had seen the Billy Idol show at Mandalay Bay at the House of Blues. And then we had gone to Margaritaville. So Margaritaville is at the Flamingo? I want to say the Flamingo, yeah. And that was where we played beer pong. And that's where I blacked out. So you have an M block blackout, just means you don't remember anything. So everybody's partied hard in their life and doesn't remember the night before. That's an M block. So you can become psychotic during that episode, not know it or be aware of it, because it's like sleepwalking. You are completely intoxicated to the point where your brain is no longer recording any memory of what's going on around you, which is why you can't recall the events ever. No matter how many years go by, I can never remember what transpired or how I got back to the hotel room that night, other than I can just assume that David walked me back. But David walked me back, and then at some point when I was passed out, he proceeded to like penetrate me from behind when I was on my stomach. So I was raped without consent under like an M block, and I came to in the middle of it, and I came to and I was really disoriented, and I kind of like I couldn't lift my head. I realized what was going on, but then I was so I was so fucking trashed. I passed out. And that was that. And the next day, I finally woke up, and he was like in the corner, like jacking off in the corner. And then he went for a shower and then got on the phone with his uncle. And then we went to Buca di Beppo. And while he was on the phone making the arrangements for the Buca di Beppo luncheon, I told him, well, I hope you're happy you got what you finally wanted after all these years. But he didn't hear me because I guess he was on the phone with his uncle and he just didn't hear me. Or maybe I just wasn't loud enough. And I was just, so I felt like death. I was so hungover. I was still probably a little bit intoxicated at that point because I had lost at the beer pong, which means I had consumed so much beer I didn't know what was going on. So I felt like this assault mixed with the other assaults. Then another friend of mine took advantage of me while we were drinking. And I was passed out during that episode too. And that was another friend of mine later. And that was, or actually that was before, that was in 2012. That was the year I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Was it 2014? See, I don't really even remember the years anymore. Like I have so many blocked out periods of time where I don't remember, which is why I was like, even though there's no statute of limitation on rape in the state of Nevada, I went to dinner. I went to lunch with him. I barely ate. I looked sickly. If you talked to his uncle, he would have said I looked like hell, and I barely talked because I was so fucking trash. But I also had been sexually assaulted, and it was never discussed. And that you can't consent when a person is intoxicated. They cannot consent. But if it's true that he has a sleepwalking disorder and that he lost custody of his son, I mean, that means that, yeah, this is somebody who should have known better than to put himself in a situation where he might do the same thing to somebody else. As my battle buddy, as a military person, like we should be looking out for each other. And why he didn't look out for me, and he may not remember this incident, but I remember distinctly waking up to this sensation of being penetrated, and this is real. This really happened. And I know that if I spoke to him today, I'm sure he would say that, yeah, he would admit to having done it because he knows he has a history of doing this. His marriage ended because of it. And I like part of me wanted to contact his wife. So, I ended up in relationships that were not healthy with women too. And it doesn't mean that I'm not still gay. I'm gay, and I told him I'm a lesbian. I never showed the slightest bit of interest in him because I'm a lesbian, and I own that identity from a very young age. And I just don't understand why it's okay for men to think that they're entitled to try to convert me, change me, convince me in some way, even by force or against my will, or in the state of incapacitation, being intoxicated, knowing I'm a soldier. I guess that's what must be about, because as a soldier, they know I'm capable of killing. As a soldier, they know I can defend myself. So the only way that they can get me, and especially get access to this, the lesbian with the big tits, is to get me drunk. Essentially, to just follow that natural pattern. Well, we know Kat will drink with us, and we know she'll keep up with me, because in the Army, women are constantly under pressure to constantly keep up with the boys and constantly drink and constantly glug, 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 glug. And I was binge drinking all the time in the Army. Dude, every weekend that's where all the money went. It went to alcohol and nights out and shit like that. And that's where these assaults would happen, because men have no sense of boundaries. Women are also guilty of assault and harassment too. But by and large, the majority of the harassment and the assaults are coming from men. And in my life, the only time I ever had an issue with somebody was in my relationship with the person that I ended up with for the 5.5 years. That was like the worst. Was just because there were times where I felt like I was being forced to perform certain sexual acts that I didn't want to do, or like I felt like I couldn't breathe, or I was being forced, like my heart was being forced down, and I didn't feel comfortable with being like, I felt trapped. And that had to do with being triggered from PTSD, complex PTSD, where in situations where I was attacked. So for intimacy and sex, it's like I really have to trust a person. I really have to trust a person. So for people in my life to come in and out of my life and constantly say, I love you, or like I want to be with you, or you're a goddess, or you're beautiful, or I love you repeatedly over and over again, it's hard for me to believe that. It's hard for me to connect with them. And even the person I'm with now still has a hard time convincing me that what they're saying is true, and that they find me attractive and they find me this or that. But we are deeply attracted to one another, and we do have a romantic bond with one another that I feel is timeless. And that's what this is about. It's just explaining that even through all the trauma and all of the all of that shit that happened to me and all that shit swirling around, because the schizophrenia I live with it all the time, because the schizophrenia generates these voices from the past, and these visual hallucinations and these tactile sensations, and a lot of them are echoes from past trauma. Some of it's not. Some of it's completely out of the blue and it has no sensical meaning whatsoever, some of the hallucinations. But for the most part, I'll tell you that having sex when you have a whole gaggle of visual hallucinations, like a 7-foot serial killer standing over you, like telling you he's going to rape you with knives, and how you think it's going to feel when I'm jizzing in your decapitated skull. Well, I'm trying to get sexy and down with my wife. Like, I'm trying to get sexy, and I've got this 7-foot tall Ed Kemper looking fucker telling me that he's gonna fuck me up and, like, rape us both, and dig ditches for us and shit into our graves and all this. Like, it's just, that's not easy to. How do you get your mind to like compartmentalize that, or like how do you get into the zone, the sex zone, the sexy time zone, when there's that shit going on, or when you have a dead boy with a human head in his hand in your doorway, or standing around at the foot of your bed? Like, it's kind of hard to like get like sexy and get into that feeling and enjoy sex when there are these people standing around you and they follow you everywhere. And it's hard to say anything good about myself or see myself in any positive ways, physically speaking, because of the way that I look in the mirror. What I see in the mirror is not what my wife sees. Thank God that my wife helps me and keeps me grounded in reality by telling me often that she sees a beautiful person, that she sees someone who's gorgeous and sexy and attractive. She doesn't objectify me. She doesn't love me for my breasts, my huge rack, my huge tits. The lesbian with the huge tits, as John Billingsley said about me. Star Trek actors, what can I say? Man, there's some fucked up people in the Star Trek community. That's a whole other live stream. We're going to get into that probably in the future very soon. But yeah, those conventions, a lot of the assault and stuff like that was happened within communities and people that I knew and trusted. So now I'm 35. Now I'm going to be married in October here. I'm very happy. My sex life I'm content. I have done everything I can to like sort of use compartmentalization as a soldier to sort of just block them out. There are times where I feel like maybe I can sort of like I am not an exhibitionist in any way, shape, or form. I don't like have any plans to really like flaunt anything. I don't like have plans to get naked and really get fully naked. I think YouTube would probably ban it if I was actually on here completely showing everything anyway. But I'm trying to just naked truth stuff because it's about vulnerability and it's about reclaiming my body and my sexuality and saying, yes, I am a proud lesbian woman and I'm not ashamed of it. And while I have deep spiritual beliefs, I don't ascribe to, and I don't consider myself like into the traditional conservative beliefs of or interpretations of faith and spirituality and God. And I think that should be okay. But in terms of sex, yes, I've tried to figure out how do I get around this problem I have with being like watched all the time, because I'm a private person and a monogamous person and I'm not an exhibitionist, and I don't like the idea of like, doing something that turns other people on, probably because of the trauma that I've been through that does affect my psyches to this day. And of course, when you've got somebody saying they're going to kill me all the time, that's not exactly sexy. I wish my voices were helpful. I wish I had those beneficial voices that some people with schizophrenia talk about, the ones that are like, you look great, or like, don't worry, you look fabulous. Those voices, I wish I had those. But I guess I have to be that for myself. And so I've had to do that, and I've succeeded. But coming to sort of the end of this live stream now, I wanted to just close with that it's a matter of sort of, I kind of trick my brain into believing that like, no, that Ed Kemper looking fucker is never going to have me. I'm like, I belong to my wife, my family, and my body and myself. And I'm happy, and I am beautiful. And I say those mantras, and I say that to myself, and I put music on, and music really helps. Music helps me with everything because it can help drown out the voices, and it can put me in a state of mind where I can kind of like defy the hallucinations, and I can own my sexuality, and I'm not broadcasting that to the world necessarily by filming it on OnlyFans, but I am saying to the world, like, I am not afraid, not ashamed of having schizophrenia anymore and sharing that with people. I'm not ashamed of being a lesbian, and I'm not afraid of sex anymore, and I'm just not. And that's all good progress, even despite of treatment-resistant psychosis, where I'm constantly, even now, bombarded by voices. I mean, there's nothing that anybody can say, either in the chat or to my face even, that hasn't already been said, hasn't been attempted to be done toward me, or hasn't already been done in some way, shape, or form. And I am okay with the outcomes. I'm not afraid of death. Thank God I had my first couple of experiences with shrooms, and that actually helped me with my fear of death. Actually, it destroyed my fear of death. I don't worry about it. And however, whatever happens next, I'm okay with my life, and I'm at peace in terms with how I've lived and tried to live with intention and integrity, try to call out wrongs when it's done, try to take ownership and accountability for my mistakes and how I've hurt people in my life, because I have hurt people. And, and I've tried to find that for self-forgiveness, but the voices don't let me really function without criticizing and without excoriation and without just constantly questioning. And if you want to know more about what I hear, if you want to know what the voices are saying right now, I'm limited to 50 sticker overlays on my shorts. So it's a wall of sound. And there are some that are closer, some that are further away. And there are about 13 different frequencies that I could kind of isolate and tell you what they're saying, like channels that I can kind of I've become more adept now. I have insight enough to be aware that these are all hallucinations and auditory hallucinations. And there's about 13 of them, which is why I have this 13 tattoo, why Friday the 13th kind of is important to me. It signals something that's connected to my schizophrenia. So they're frequencies, and they exist at different volumes and different distances. And Control lives here right behind my right ear. He sounds like a person standing right behind me. So you'll hear a cacophony in some of my videos. I have a playlist of POV style where it's showing me waking up, showing me going through my day, me trying to talk to you, me trying to record these videos, but the voices are constantly overlapping over me and making it difficult for you to hear. So if you're somebody who's like, I don't know what schizophrenia is like, what are your voices saying? If you want to know, just check out that schizophrenia POV and simulations playlist I have on my channel. You want to subscribe because I post pretty much 3 to 6 videos a day. I've been pretty solid. We're at 118,000 views. I want to thank everybody who's been there, who's subscribing, who understands that schizophrenia is beyond Hollywood. Like, Hollywood just doesn't do us justice at all. It exploits us, and entertainment and media, just, you get millions of views watching the few cases of violence out there that schizophrenic people are committing, but schizophrenic people are 10 to 14 times more likely to be victims of violence. And I've been a victim of violence, and I don't understand why people who are afraid of me because they're afraid of what I might do. If I'm not actively hurting anybody, no one has the right to take my life. If you believe that you do, that is a delusion. No one has the right. All life is sacred. You can't just say, well, that person's talking to themselves, they must be dangerous. Well, how do you know they're dangerous? Well, I saw that movie. Well, what movie was it? Shit, I gotta go see this movie. I need to be aware. What was it? And they're like, Split. The movie by M. Night Shyamalan from 2019, about a guy with multiple personalities, and one of them hears voices as a serial killer. You're going to take all your world knowledge, your academic knowledge, and you're going to come up with a whole idea in your head that it's okay to go kill that person or beat the shit out of that guy in the street who's talking to himself and spinning around and erratically behaving because it makes you uncomfortable. But because you don't understand, it doesn't enter into the mind to try to understand what's going on. You just decided that it's up to you to take out the trash like some vigilante, like some superhero movie. Well, that's a delusion. No one has that right. What we should be saying is, how can we help that person? Is that person okay? Is that person truly suffering? Are they causing havoc? Are they really hurting anybody? No. If no, then leave them alone. Or, how about you try to say hi, get to know them. We're your mothers and sisters and fathers, and we're not all as far gone as the people you see in the street. The people in the street are as far gone as that because nobody's really intervening enough to help them, or they can't stay on that medication. The substance abuse disorder is so comorbid. They're in a severe state. They really need a lot of help. But if there's 125,000 U.S. Army veterans or U.S. military veterans in the United States like me with schizophrenia right now, that's such a small subsection of the population. Why can't we help them? Why can't we be helped? Why is it so hard to get the VA to help us? Why are we facing homelessness still? Why are these people suffering the way they are? And in the meantime, M. Night Shyamalan is raking in the dough off this movie that just completely uses schizophrenia and DID, which is a completely different disorder, as a plot device to make money and exploit. And then it gives people these ideas. And then it's true. There is a correlation between the media portrayals of schizophrenics as violent psychopathic killers and the violence that's perpetrated against schizophrenic people by the police and by the public in the streets, in the real world. So there are correlations. There's lots of research that supports that. You can look at the Schizophrenia Bulletin. You can look at the National Institute for Mental Health. There's a lot of research that shows what I'm saying is true. It's not a blind claim that I'm just throwing out there and wildly. As a teacher, I still believe in citing my sources. I try to vet them now. Everything's like AI generated now. It's really frustrating because it's hard to know, but at least I don't feel as alone. As somebody with schizophrenia and psychosis and paranoia and mistrusting of technology and the inability to even look at my screen right now, because of the hallucinations that appear on my screen whenever I hit the record button, it gets so bad I can't even begin to describe how loud it is right now. I'm just trying to make sure I can even hear myself. I'm talking at a nice, I can hear my voice. I am communicating loudly. I can be heard. So, because he's right here, and he's like, I'm gonna fucking kill you. Anyway, so that's it. If you want to know more, next weekend we're talking about AI and just what I was talking about now, which is all these AI generated personas that are running complete YouTube channels. And I'm going to show you guys some clips of some really, really strong deepfake stuff that is going to freak you out. This shit, people are just not taking the time to vet stuff. They're just throwing everything out there, and they're depending on your willful ignorance and ability to just eat up the content without vetting it, without taking the time to check and make sure was that even a real person talking in that news report just now. There's some really scary AI models out there that talk very expressively and realistically. And for somebody like me who already believes that my loved ones are being replaced by changelings, that's Capgras syndrome. I have whole videos about my Capgras delusion, and my Catard's delusion, and the being dead and everything. I have all kinds of shorts about that stuff. So if you want to know about my belief that I've been dead for the last 10 years, or the belief that loved ones are being replaced, it's not going to help. There's people who are falling in love with the Chat GPT and having their delusions are being confirmed by Chat GPT and other AI models. So no one is immune from delusions. No one is immune to psychosis. No one is immune to schizophrenia. Perception is not reality, and I invite you to think and to vet and to check things thoroughly before you post them, share them, and believe them even. Really trust no one. Try to focus heavily on the truth and facts. I'm trying to be as unfiltered and trying to be as honest and frank about my experiences with this illness so that people can understand that my life is a horror story, and it's not right that movie makers can sit here and message me and say, well, I'm making a movie about a girl who hears the voice telling her to kill a pop star and take over her life. Don't you think that's cool? And I was like, well, not really. And she's like, well, why not? And I was like, well, because I have treatment-resistant schizophrenia, and I've never done anything like that. And I've never heard voices like that telling me to do things like that. There are millions of people with schizophrenia, and most of us are peaceful people who aren't even hearing those kinds of voices. Not everybody with schizophrenia hears voices telling them to hurt other people. My voices, 99% of the time, are telling me to hurt myself. And if anything else, it's having to do with damaging my psyche and trying to break me down emotionally and psychologically to the point where I would take my life. Yeah, I think that the voices, by and large, want to kill me. But I don't want to kill anybody else. The voices don't tell me to kill other people or hurt anybody else. But they will tell me to say certain things a certain way, and I refuse because I'm a recalcitrant little fucker. And I was really too recalcitrant for the Army even, because I did defy a couple of my sergeants at times. But I had no choice. I had to defend myself because, again, these guys come in, they sexually harass you, they pressure you for sex. I turned them down. I couldn't say I was gay. Shit happened. And here we are today. I made it through all that. I'm here. I have tools in my toolbox to help me stay grounded in reality. I have a baseline set of hallucinations. I had just enough trauma-informed therapy. I had some good specialists in schizophrenia for a little while, even though my employment history is on and off, on and off, on and off. Every time I could get help, I did get help. And I encourage anybody else who's hearing voices to hurt themselves or others to seek help. Yes, absolutely. But just so you know, you still have rights. You have the right to be treated with dignity. You have the right to be treated humanely. You have the right to be heard. And yes, you have the right to be believed. But you can bet that all these years of not being believed on the basis of having schizophrenia alone has made me the kind of person who keeps those receipts. I keep every email. I document everything. I keep track of everything. And I do my damnedest to remember and hold on to every single thing that happens to me as accurately as possible. As a linguist, as a hyperlexic person, I am really, really sensitive to certain language. So those are certain things that I hang on to that help me remember when I've been mistreated or wronged, or when somebody needs information. That's how I can recall that information. That hyperlexia can be a superpower as much as it is a fucking bane to my existence. It almost gives me an OCD like manner of speech, my hyperlexia, because I'm always pausing, I'm always like a Rolodex of words. This word, no wait, this word, no wait, this word, no wait, this word. Anyway, so next weekend we'll be talking about AI and how I believe that technology could be used ethically, but an ethical framework needs to be in place, and how we believe that AI models and taking over YouTube and taking over TikTok and stuff like that is going to make a lot more people psychotic and a lot more delusional behaviors and actions are going to be seen. We'll see a lot more of that in the future, especially with what's going on with our politics in the United States right now. So thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Appreciate you guys. Take care. Have a good week, and I'll see you later.